that I believe will be of common interest to all of us. And the topic of my presentation is positive psychology in Sub-Saharan Africa, the Nigerian experience. By way of the outline of our presentation, I'm going to give a brief overview of positive psychology, go to talk about why we study positive psychology, then narrow down to talk about the Nigerian experience. And our discussion of the Nigerian experience is based on data which we collected. As we say, society attends to only that which is measured. And then from the data and the findings, we look at how we can influence social change for a better society before I give my final thoughts. What is positive psychology? A lot of people who have psychology background in the audience may be familiar with Professor Martin Seligman, who pioneered the field that we call positive psychology. Before he came into talking about positive psychology, he's much more widely known for his work on learned helplessness. But through his researches in the 1960s, 70s, up to the 80s, he discovered that much of psychology has been giving much attention to the negative, to psychopathology, to people with problems, and less attention is being given to the positive sides of life. And so that is how he came about the broader view or vision of repairing the worst in order to build positive qualities in human beings. So in that line, positive psychology simply refers to the science of positive individual qualities, the science of positive institutions, and the science of positive trust. If we look at it from these three major components, the first, which is positive individual qualities or individual experiences, you are referring to such things as when you mention happiness, when you mention love, when you mention flow. And then the individual traits are talking about things like resilience, things like hardiness and character strengths. The last leg of positive psychology, which is positive institutions, refers to the aspect that now has to do with trying to see how to apply what is learned from these positive individual experiences and traits to be able to know how to change the human society. For example, in the work setting, when you are now trying to apply what is known about these earlier aspects of positive psychology to be able to change how things are being done and how work is done. There are a lot of other definitions of this positive psychology, but in general, what they are all talking about is geared towards making life worth living for people. And arising from that, there are also other things, positives that have come. In our own context now, why do we think it is important to study positive psychology? One reason, which I think positive psychology matters, is that it studies what affects everyone. For example, the ultimate goal of life that people want to achieve is survival. The people want to be, not just be able to be seen, to be living, but to get the best of life. And so in that note, it is something that has a commonality for everybody. And then positive psychology is important because positive states are first physical states. People who are happy most of the time are healthier. And then high levels of well-being also leads to pro-social behaviors. When people have high quality of life, most of the time, they are more inclined to help other people. And then values also shape human progress. One of the attributes I mentioned earlier in positive psychology is the positive individual traits. And I talked about character strengths. Character strengths like issues of courage, justice, humanity, and wisdom are all valuable attributes that we know that they matter when it comes to progressing in life. And then positive psychology is important because the good life can be taught and learned. The focus of our discussion this evening is on Nigeria. And so when I look at our Nigerian situation, we see some things that we can say that are far from the expected standards of what they should be. We have low per capita real income, we have high population growth, high rates of unemployment, and dependence on the primary sector and the primary commodity export dependence. Oil is the only thing that seems to, everybody in Nigeria seems to depend on to survive. And once anything happens to it, we seem to run into troubles. So in the Sub-Saharan African context, positive psychology has not been very much experienced or felt in terms of its impact. And there are a lot of reasons why this is the case, including our country, Nigeria, or my own country, Nigeria. One is that much of the existing data in positive psychology comes from developing countries. We have limited number of experts who are very knowledgeable in the area. Funding for research is also scarce in terms of funding that comes from within. It is very scarce. And I talk of funding that comes from within because in most situations, if you depend on external funding for your research and higher education, it's always very problematic. So what matters is that the funding for research should be homegrown, and then the external funding comes to support and supplement or augment what is being done. And then other important thing is lack of implementation. A lot of research that we do in Nigeria do not really translate into practical actions. And then the other important thing is that the multidisciplinarity of positive psychology is also something that tends to hinder its growth and development in the Sub-Saharan African setting, in the sense that people scholars in African settings tend to most of the time keep to their lanes, and for that reason, it hinders the growth of the field. If you look at the screen, you are going to see that in this list of universities offering positive psychology, it's only in South Africa, that is Northwest University, Potchefstroom, that we will have as an African university that offers a master's program in positive psychology. The other ones are from Europe and America and Australia. And so in trying to see the extent to which positive psychology matters in Nigeria, especially among psychologists in Nigeria, I set out to be able to carry out a research on the perceptions of Nigerian psychologists about positive psychology. And the participants were 119 psychologists, and a self-developed questionnaire, perception of positive psychology scale, was what I administered to these participants using the online form, Google form, which was shared to their various platforms. By specialty of the respondents, majority were in clinical psychology, and as some of us in this environment knows, clinical psychology tends to be more predominant and widely patronized compared to the other fields. And about the questions they were asked, the participants, when they were asked to rate whether positive psychology has some good scientific information to be able to go on in our environment, a majority of participants were neutral. This particular question is important because a lot of criticisms of positive psychology is that much of what you see in positive psychology is already covered in other fields. And so for that reason, why would you come to have it in this environment? And you can see that a lot of people from their responses here are neutral in that regard. And then the other question of positive psychology should have the same acceptance as the other specialty areas of psychology. A lot of participants agreed to the statement. And then the next is, if there is a course or program in positive psychology, I would encourage others to enroll in it. Most of the respondents agreed that we are going to encourage people to enroll. And then as a professor, I will be disposed to integrate positive psychology into the courses I teach when relevant. Majority agreed that they will do so. And the further analysis that I did showed that age was not associated with the perceptions of positive psychology, and gender was also, there was also no gender differences. And happily, interestingly, lecturers had more positive perceptions of positive psychology than the non-lecturers. And then when people were asked whether there is any course they were doing in the school that has anything to do with positive psychology, those that said yes, their responses did not have any effect when it comes to their perceptions of this field. And from the findings, one can deduce that a lot of implications for social change in the Nigerian society can be gleaned from the findings. And I am going to, first of all, do it by asking some questions. One is there any field that should not come in when it comes to positive psychology? And my answer to that question is that I think that every field that has anything to contribute in making life worth living is important in positive psychology. The over-compartmentalization that we often see in the research field in Nigeria does not often help progress in the field. And if we are going to make progress, we need to be able to see what others can offer. Then is what you are doing working? That is what I keep asking people. If we discover that what we are doing does not always seem to help us in achieving our goals, it may be very helpful to see how to bring others into the picture. And in order to help us to achieve these goals, I am proposing that it is important that under the Nigerian Psychological Association, experts and people who are interested in the positive psychology should form interest groups and also see how to be able to form collaborations with the Positive Psychology Association of Nigeria and see how they can advance the field. Most times, it's always better to achieve things when you work together with other people. There are a lot of funding agencies that are looking out for where and how they can inform, how they can invest and fund researches in low and middle income countries. But individuals cannot do this alone. They can easily give money to organizations and associations compared to individuals. So if there is this synergy and combined efforts by people who are members of these interest groups or associations, it's going to be very helpful in advancing the field in Nigeria. Then I am also of the view that much of our work in positive psychology and generally in research psychology in Nigeria often end up from the level of theories. We need to see how these findings we are making apply in the field. And one field which interestingly is being pioneered by psychologists in America and other parts of the world is implementation science. So, and this implementation science talks about how we can be able to see to what extent evidence-based interventions apply on a general scale in Nigeria. For example, if you notice that a particular intervention that helps to increase productivity in the workplace or to increase quality of work life has been known to work, you see how to be able to take this to the field, apply it in a particular context, and then scale it up so that it becomes general. The field should also be able to take criticism seriously and listen and learn from it. And I am of the view that there is need for at least a few universities to start doing postgraduate programs in positive psychology. And a journal of positive psychology should be developed. And I am proposing a journal that we can call Journal of Positive Psychology in Developing Societies. so that it becomes all-inclusive and not just a Nigerian thing. Free online courses are available. Those interested should consult various platforms such as Coursera.org. And those who are interested in the field should, as much as possible, try to engage the media and speak to the media. Sometimes one particular terminology that I always find very much helpful is this idea of trying to see how we can make our science attractive, how we can make our science more appealing. When our science becomes appealing, it is easy for us to be able to get people to follow us and to hear what we are saying. And finally, I am of the view that positive psychology has come a long way, but regrettably, the potentials needs to be harnessed in developing countries to achieve a global impact. It's time for us as researchers in Nigeria to arise and take action in this regard. I can see my acknowledgements, people who have influenced my thoughts in the area of positive psychology. And then my gratitude to the African Research Network too. Then these are my references. Thank you.
All right.